Good evening, everybody. I said, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I know it's cold outside and everybody's a little, quiet, but I'm from Barbados, so I have the biggest excuse in the room to be sort of a little bit low-key. Thank you all for coming. We are, I'm very, very happy to be here. I think, there's a lot of information out there about branding and how to market your companies. I have a slightly different view. I like things simple, and so I won't try to impart too many words of wisdom that are so deep that you walk away wondering what you learn. I'm just going to try to engage a line of thinking that I think is very helpful and has guided me through a lot of difficult decisions. The company that I founded is Ad Hoc Industries. We're a marketing and branding company. We work on a number of different clients, all the way from startups through to large clients like Barbados Tourism. We did a global brand campaign with Rihanna a couple years ago now, and launched that in 2013. So that was a large project. We're doing some stuff with Go Boston 2030, which is looking at the future of transportation around the city. And we go from there all the way down to mentoring here and also working with small startups. So we're able to scale quite well. But the reason we're here today is to talk about positioning and how to put your brand out front. And for us, as you start a company or you're in a company in a position of marketing or you're chief marketing officer, whether you're branding, there's so many other things that are happening. And this goes especially for startups in this arena, where there's the operational things, the financial stuff. If you're looking for funding, there's so many other things that are happening that branding often takes a back seat. And then a lot of it is so, sort of loose and creative. A lot of people aren't just comfortable enough with it, right? So generally it gets pushed to the back burner a little bit. And what I'm going to try to do is to just give a few pointers in terms of how to just think very simply about it and make things happen for your company to put your brand out front. So I generally think about three things, and these things are what I like to call universal, right? It doesn't matter what industry you're in. These three things always apply. Those three things are differentiation, desirability, and design. And no matter what the industry, and they're interrelated, obviously, and without good design, you're not going to be differentiated. Without differentiation, and design, you're probably not going to be desirable. And this is just all about making your target audience love you, right? And so those three things, if you keep them in mind as sort of guiding principles around branding, I think that these can stand you in very good stead for the future. Even when you're buried with other things, just those three simple things can help. And I'll show you examples of how. When it comes to design, some simple things make such a huge difference. Just consider the word objectified and look at the creative execution. This is actually a documentary that I would recommend that everybody should read, because it takes everyday objects and it spells the word objectified. And nowadays, we're moving into a world where everything is visual. You can see how very, very simple treatments to simple words, which could be your brand name, can make a huge difference in how your company is perceived. We're in this world where nobody's reading. Everybody is doing other things, right? Everybody has so much going on. Everybody is scrolling and clicking and everything, but nobody's really reading that much anymore for any length of time. But there's more content than ever. So the challenge is always, how do you create an audience? How do you keep them engaged? And how do you punch through the noise? And there's a lot of it. So we start with some very simple things. When you're starting your company, the first thing you need for your presence is a website. Who's designing your website? A lot of people the first thing people do is to ask their friends, well, who designed your website? And this person says, well, this person designed it. Well, 9 times out of 10 is somebody who's actually building the site. Now, website developers are very, very different from website designers. Now obviously developers love to believe that they're creative, and a lot of times they are to a certain extent, but they're not designers. So the first thing that you need to do is to have a website designer and a website developer, and they're very, very, very different things. That's one of the first things to recognize in any company. And that alone can make such a big difference in the presence of what you're doing. Your website designer will have some knowledge of development. Don't depend on them to develop your site either, right? But it's really, really important to understand that there's a distinction, and a lot of people confuse the two.
I just have a question. I've never heard of a website designer. How
Yep.
much does a website designer cost? And I know how much a decent website developer costs.
Right. Well, if you're asking me, how much ever your website developer charges you, I would pay my website designer twice the amount. That's the amount of importance that I put on website, on design in general. In a lot of cases for companies, we solve business problems with designers, not in a traditional way, not with people even necessarily with marketing backgrounds, right? And there are a couple of examples that I'll go through just to show you. A lot of the emphasis is on functionality and getting your product right and getting the details and of your app working and all of that. But in a lot of cases, functionality alone, especially in this time, is not a sustainable advantage. And the reason is that as soon as you design something and you put it out there, there's 5 people who see it and say, you know what, that's great. But it would be even better if we did this, this, and this. And they start doing that. And so that, it is not a sustainable advantage. As much emphasis as you have to put on it is important. And I like to give the example of breathing, like it's an important bodily function, but you don't brag about it, right? So you think about functionality in the same way is extremely, extremely important, but that's not the thing that makes you special, right? Descriptive content, a lot of people put emphasis on that. Well, first of all, people aren't really reading that much. But second of all, it's not really a competitive advantage that's sustainable, because as smart as we are and as clever as we are, there's always somebody who's going to find a hole somewhere in something that you've done. So, there's always this fear, and something that you always have to be thinking about is, when will I be leapfrogged? So the keys to getting around it are a few simple ones. One's the element of surprise. Always keep your target audience wondering what you're going to do next. The other one is the element of discovery. People always want to find out things first. They always want to know that they're the first ones to find things out. So when you launch something, you do like a sort of like a limited edition launch things for a certain amount of people who you make sure are opinion leaders or influencers. That's the type of thing where that's how you get buzz out there about whatever the initiative is that you're doing. And it doesn't matter what the company is. You need your influencers, you need those mouthpieces, and you need that element of discovery, consumers love to discover things, and they love to think they've discovered it first. The other thing you need is a constant flow of brand initiative. We talked about leapfrogging. One of the best ways not to be leapfrog is to be constantly doing new things that surprise and allow your consumer set to always be engaged, always wondering what you're going to do next. Simple visual content, less is always more. As technical as your product is, less is always more. And images are always better than words in most cases. Visual content, if you're going to have it, even though it's great, less than 90 seconds is always best. Less than 60 seconds is even better. The shorter, the better. The quicker you can get your message across, the better it is. Strategic partnerships. A lot of people are scared of this because that means, you're giving your ideas away to somebody else and, who knows, or, But at the end of the day, the best partners are the things that help you move faster. I am on for Barbados Tourism and working with Rihanna. Their management company is Rock Nation. So I was talking to Jay Brown, who's the president of Rock Nation, and a lot of the times, these guys, there's a reason why Jay-Z partners with Kanye West in Paris, or he partners with Justin Timberlake somewhere else. And the reason they do this is because if Jay-Z does a concert by himself in every city, there's no reason for a fan to follow him to every city. But every time he partners with somebody else, it's a unique experience. And, as business people, as you start your companies, it's better to think like that. Like how can you find complementary partners that keep your brand moving and can keep things exciting and keep your consumers coming back to see what you're going to do next. And that in of itself could be the element of surprise. So I'm going to take you through 3 case studies, Uber, Puma, and Barbados. Uber because I love it, Barbados because I love it, Puma because I worked there so long, but I also love the brand. But in all cases, I think these are 3 brands that either I have intimate knowledge of or I've watched very, very closely and have a lot of respect for how they approach things. And they reinforce what I mentioned earlier about design and desirability and differentiation. Okay, so in the case of Uber, everybody knows they're almost becoming like Kleenex, like you don't talk about any other car ride service like you do Uber anymore. But just think of how they launch, right? They launch with an ice cream truck, in the middle of summer. And what does, you would think that this would really have more to do with, sort of offering car rides, which they did. But, coming up with this idea of, delivering, ice cream to potential customers really created a buzz in the city. Now, that's very unusual. There's the element of surprise. Like you're like, what? Somebody's going to bring ice cream to my office. This is the type of, this is one example, and this is how I've started to first notice Uber. So it was available in 144 cities. I mean, they not only did just a test, there was scale to it. Then they did South by Southwest, which if you've been there, you know how hard it is to get around. So they did this little cab thing, and then they did also a partnership where they delivered pulled pork sandwiches, via these pedicabs as well. So they've taken a pain point from a very popular event, and they've made it into their own. And that's the type of thinking when you think strategic partnerships, when you think of interesting initiatives, when you think of the element of surprise. These are the types of things that you have. So you are not thinking linearly about, okay, I'm offering people a destination, to get from point A to point B. You're thinking about how do you get their attention and how do you keep them wondering what you're going to do next. So they also did the Uber chopper ride to the Hamptons. For $500 or $600, you can get there in 45 minutes versus, I don't know, 3 hours fighting New York traffic trying to get from Manhattan into the city. So now they're going even, they're going high end, they're going low end with the pedicabs. In San Francisco, they did the Uber time machine with GE, with the DeLorean ride. I mean, so you can see these initiatives are not really always related to transportation. They're just doing other things. And I found myself wondering, what are they going to do next? So I started reading every day to figure out, all right, well, I'm interested in branding, right? So I do this anyway, but these initiatives in particular got my attention. That's an example of the DeLorean. I don't know if you guys know the DeLorean is a very famous car and a very famous owner who ended up in a lot of trouble. But even that alone was part of the story, right? When there was strikes in San Francisco with BART, Uber offered a book to option. Again, they're taking a pain point. They're taking advantage of a situation where there's a lot of publicity. They're providing a solution. This one has to do with transportation, but it's water. It's not their primary goal. I mean, I don't think their business model was based around boat rides, right? But they've used it in a way that is very, very interested and innovative. Then they did the NFL partnership with NFL player cards, so NFL players have the opportunity to take rides home after the games. Massive, massive audience, of course, right? So in terms of strategic partnerships, very, very, very smart move. These are things that their competition aren't doing, and these are types of things that are very, very hard to follow, right? If you're Lyft or somebody else, you're wondering, how do I keep up with this stuff, right? And that's how you differentiate yourself from your competition, and they've managed to do it in a very, very, very creative way. And just the last point, if you look at everything they do, the design of it, you can see this blue palette, the abstract art, you can see, the links, and there's a consistent design language that's through these initiatives that they're pulling off, right? So I just want to show you that these 3 points, design, differentiation, are all a part of their success. So by the time people started protesting and going to their, pushing the political route, and all this, the game was over. Matter of fact, in London, by the time the taxi cabs, did this demonstration, the week after, they had an 800% increase in Uber traffic, so in business in London. So this just is one example of not thinking linearly and just becoming extremely desirable to your audience to the point where nobody can shut you down. I mean, they run into some trouble. They've done some things. Obviously, they've made some mistakes. But the point is this: those three elements are things that they did very, very well. And I think if they continue, they'll continue to be a leader in the market. One interesting thing is that the founder, he says in the beginning, it was a lifestyle company. So that surprised me too, right? Because I'm thinking it's a transportation initiative. It's a, taxi. It's a lifestyle company. And what he's saying, you push a button and a black car comes up. Who's the baller, right? It was a baller move to get a black car to arrive in 8 minutes, right? That's what it is. So he's describing it even differently. He's talking about a lifestyle company, right? And what do you think about it? It does make a lot of sense. Everybody has a perception of themselves, and everybody likes to think, oh, well, I roll a certain way. And the idea that, at the head of the company, they're thinking not about a black car, not about SUV. What is the lifestyle that we want to bring into this company? I think that's amazing, amazing insight, and it gets to the heart of what it's really, really all about, right? It's not about the direct functionality of things. It's about, a lifestyle. And I think that's an important principle, whatever the industry that you're in, to think about, like, what is this all about? How can I impact people's lives, as opposed to thinking directly about what you're trying to offer? So Puma is very similar in many ways. I started in Puma back in 1999. I spent 10 years there. When I started, they had one challenge, which was to build desirability. The company was just coming out of bankruptcy. We didn't know, we knew that we couldn't win against Nike or Adidas on any principle. You can pick any parameter. There's nowhere that we could beat them on and say we're going to be number one. So what we said was we're going to build desirability. And what does that mean? Well, we needed a new mentality, we needed to get ahead, and we needed to stay ahead. And so we came up with a mission statement after many, many days and months of thinking of what would be a great mission statement. And we wanted to say we wanted to be number one at something, but we couldn't find a scenario where it would be true, or where it would be realistic, or where it would even be inspiring. So we came up with the mission statement to be the most desirable sport lifestyle brand in the world. Now, desirable was an important word in there, and then sport lifestyle was the other big thing. And the reason why sports lifestyle was an important element of it is because up until then, Nike, Adidas, all our large competition just focused on performance. That's the number one thing. Everything else was gravy. They just wanted performance, performance, performance in their messaging. We said, well, when we look at all the soccer players in the Premier League in the UK, of course they wear soccer boots, but as soon as they get off the field, what are they wearing? They're getting into the latest Bugatti, they're wearing the biggest fashion stuff, so why are we just talking performance? Sport and lifestyle go together. So again, this word lifestyle is coming up again, right? And so that changed everything in the company, because all of a sudden designers then had the opportunity to take any product and make it look good, as well as make it perform, right? So one of our first strategic partnerships was with Jill Sander. And what she did was to take our most hallowed soccer boot that nobody could touch, the Puma King, and she took the bottom off with all the cleats, and she put on a low-profile rubber bottom on it, put some sexy materials on the top, and beautiful leathers and everything, very luxe, and she did a little launch. We sold them for something like $400 a piece, and they sold out in literally seconds, right? And that gave the organization then a lot of confidence to say, well, this sport lifestyle thing is something that we can tap into. This is something that we can build on for a consumer base, and it's also a way to differentiate ourselves from the competition, right? So that mission statement took us through. Of course, the basics were still there. I left this slide in here because what I'm telling you doesn't mean that you don't build a sound business strategy, you don't focus on functionality and everything. But, so we had our restructure period, we had our invest period, we had the momentum, we had to expand, we had a very, very solid business strategy. But it was all wrapped in this: how are people going to perceive us? How are we going to get people to keep wondering what we're going to do next? So when I started, we were €6 on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. And we'll get back to that later. So how did Puma punch through the noise? And I'll show you. We did this initiative with Jamaica, and you'll see there are two old ladies in Puma sneakers at the top of the screen. And this is a campaign that we did with Jamaica. And up until then, it's always young, athlete, running faster than you can imagine, or jumping higher than you can imagine. Even today, that's all you see. Who takes two old Jamaican ladies and puts them in sneakers and make a big advertising campaign from that? Only crazy people, right? Or desperate people, which we were at the time. But the point is that that was a huge surprise, and it was different from what was being done. But the shoes looked good. Those ladies had a lot of personality, and we integrated in the program, and it was very successful. Along with that came a performance element in the name of Usain Bolt. And we also did then some campaigns with him. And I'll play one of the commercials that we did with him right now.
I you me tell you once, so no make me tell you twice. Cause when me want me back around, the thing you not go die. Me not fi go watch him because me not go hear me voice. I'll take a lunch with the next.
So the idea there was that, you have a relay, you have a baton, you pass the baton, the other person has to run. So, the guy's enjoying himself at the party, and, up comes Usain Bolt, passes the baton, he gets the shoes, and then he has to go, and Usain gets the party, which he loves to do, by the way, When we got him, by the way, nobody wanted him. Asafa Powell, Nike took. They went all around him. Nobody took him because nobody thought he was serious, because all he wanted to do was DJ at parties. He was always late. He was always, having fun somewhere, and he never seemed to take running that seriously. We took him because, hey, he's there and he's affordable, and, he likes fun, we like fun, and we gotta do something interesting. So, and we'll see a little bit more about him later, but that turned out to be a really, really good move for us. It was economical, it injected personality into the brand, it allowed us to do things that we wouldn't normally do, and it really separated ourselves from the competition. And then we were able to do, creative initiatives like this that, sort of, help move us along. This is another one of my favorite initiatives, again, with no money. So I'm sitting with my team, and I'm thinking, my budget is like $2 for this season, and I am responsible for 30 million pairs of shoes. How am I going to do something that's meaning anything? I get these huge projections on one side, and everybody expects me to achieve this stuff. And so what are we going to do? All right, we need to look for some design inspiration somewhere. But we have no money to travel, so where are we going to go? So we went down to Garment District in Cambridge. And we were walking around looking at materials of different garments and stuff, and saying, we're making shoes. We left Garment District with about 40 garbage bags full of clothes. We shipped them to Taiwan, had them washed over there, and we flew there a week later. And then we just, room this size, we just started putting pieces of clothing together, things that match, things that look like they could go together, things that contrasted with each other in interesting ways. We did a lot of that. Spent like another 4 or 5 days doing it. And we took a little Polaroid picture of each combination that we did. Out of that, we built about 510 pairs of shoes, all unique, right? And then we did, I think it was like 4 or 5 days. We sort of pull it all together, pull all the concepts together. We had then a huge organizational task. So don't get me wrong, this creative stuff comes with a lot of just grunge work, right? But at the end of the day, we did a launch in London. We did sort of a museum type thing. We had the gobo, like you can see in the thing outside, and people were lined up around the block, to come get in to see this initiative. It was amazing. And it probably cost us less than $400 for these clothes. I mean, I think it was like, I forget how much, 40 cents a pound or something we paid for it, right? Trips to Taiwan, that was a few $1,000s, and we ended up with 510 pairs of shoes. All right, so what else are we gonna do to promote this thing? These are clothes that would have been thrown away, so we said, well, we can't afford to advertise on High Street, but every high street in London, for example, has a side street with garbage cans, right? So why don't we just put our ads where we can afford them, right? We can't afford, we'll just go around the corner. So we went to these people and we were like, we'll pay you to put a Puma ad over our garbage can, right? And you can see right there next to the garbage can, right? And people were like, okay. And this stuff got so much buzz. People start looking for this stuff, and it's amazing. It cost us nothing, this initiative. It was called Thrift. And again, these are the types of things that you don't need a lot of money, right? You just need to surround yourself with creative people. So my advice, in this situation, or in any situation, you're starting a company, surround yourself with some designers and ask them for ideas. Don't tell them what to do, just ask them what they would do, right? It's amazing what you can do with no money. And I can tell you a story later, once Puma, we started to get money, then, things started to change, because then you start throwing money at things versus being as creative as you could be. It's just natural, right? You have more, you do more. But at this time, we had no money. And this is just an example. We did some crazy things, We did something called Peep Show, which, politically, it was definitely not correct, but, we did it anyway, and it created a lot of controversy. We did a line of shoes called Lala, right? So one style was called Balala, the next one was called Tralala, the one was Falala. And when I had to present this, imagine me going to Foot Locker and saying, okay, this is the Tralala shoe, right? It's crazy, but everybody smiled. The bad part about it was that we got sued by the Teletubbies and we had to stop the campaign, and that's the honest truth. But that was big news in London. So I'm just telling you, just thinking about things and thinking about ideas in different ways, but it's never ever a direct correlation between what you're doing and the idea to get yourself out there. The more crazy sometimes, the better. So when somebody says, well, what does that have to do with your business? You don't always have to answer that. It's what's going to get you recognition. So we did stuff with Volvo Ocean Race. Here we had the idea that the sea monster was coming up from below the boat and pulling it down, and that drove everything that we did. So if you look at the bottom of the sneaker, you'll see that there's a suction cups. You can see the inspiration that we use for the octopus tentacles. You look at if you could get a close-up of the bike, you'll see that the bike tires also have that same idea for the traction on the tires.
Another question. How did you know that these would actually create buzz and would get you the results that you're looking for? And you're right, they were not crazy expensive, but when you're on no budget or a small budget, even low budget stuff is expensive, right? So
Yeah.
how did you have the confidence to pick one idea over another, and what gave you the idea that this would actually work?
First of all, you don't know. A lot of this is high-risk stuff. But if you're not spending, $1 million for a campaign, you can afford to make a couple of mistakes here or there. I mean, some of I'm presenting you the nice stuff. Some of it was, duds too, But the point is that you want your ratio to, you want to have a good enough ratio. I would say, 50-50 is good enough. If you hit, it's really big, and if you miss, it hurts in the pocket. But just as long as you have a constant flow, doesn't matter. But in order to get there, you have to surround yourself with creative people. That's the key. If you were based in Boston, you'd see what we did with Volvo Ocean Race. We didn't just sponsor the boat, but we created what we call Puma City. And this was built from 8 or 12 containers, and you can see how when they're separated, they went from port to port. I think there were 13 stops, the Volvo Ocean Race. And every city, we did this. It had a bar on the top, it had a retail store on the bottom, and a lounge areas in the middle with DJs and all the stuff. We did really, really good stuff. But the interesting part about this is, if you push those 3 container levels together, you'll see the Puma logo come together, right? So guess what happened when we loaded it onto the ship to go to the next port, right? Massive Puma logo on the side of the ship as it sailed out of the port, in addition to having the fast boats and all this. So these are just simple things, that you can do to create visibility for your brand, if you have this mentality of desirability in mind. So along the way, we did shoes like this. People ask me all the time, well, what is that shoe for? And my answer is, well, I don't know. Well, what are you doing tonight? Some people think it's sailing. Some people think it's a bike. Some people think This won numerous awards. It's in everywhere globally, and it just started from this idea of, the sport lifestyle, right? There's obviously some elements of sport there, but there's a heavy lifestyle flair to it as well. And I included a slide and called it content because one of the things people do is they throw away things that they don't think are important. Once the product is done, they throw away so much stuff. But it's all content, potentially. So you save these designs, the early designs for the shoe that I just showed you, and all of a sudden you have content. It just has to be put together in a nice way, right? And so I just included that because I was famous for going through people's garbage cans late at night, designers especially, just to figure out what they threw away. A lot of the times, it was stuff that I thought was good. People talk themselves with ideas sometimes. So, but when you're building a brand, I think it's important to capture as much content as possible while you're building the brand. So as you go through and you're starting your company, take a lot of pictures, get a lot of video. A lot of the time, by the time your company gets to any notable size, then people they hire an agency, and the agency comes in and they recreate the story for you. But you could give them a ton of content from the beginning and say, here, look, you don't have to charge me $1 million to go out and shoot new content because I have a ton of it here. Use this first, right? It's a very low budget way of having somebody cut pieces of content together into something interesting as opposed to going out and doing a shoot from scratch. So don't throw away, don't be a hoarder, but keep some stuff, make sure that you're recording what you do. And sometimes you get unscripted funny moments that can be very, very useful later. Strategic partnerships, we did a lot, not just with Joe Sander, but with Alexander McQueen, Hussein Shulayan, Sergio Rossi, the whole 9 yards, and that became the pinnacle. Did that make a lot of money? No. That was like 1% of our business. It probably took 15, 20% of our energy, but the point is that in consumers' mind, we were leading. I mean, we even went through, if you look at the Sergio Rossi shoe, the sneaker with a heel, people ask, well, why would you do that as a sports brand? But it created a lot of attention. It's like, okay, you did it, but why did you do the high heel one in purple, right? These are the types of things that I think are really, really important. Somebody, one of the buyers at one of the presentations that I went to said, Adrian, I would never buy this stuff, but I need to see it from you guys because I need to believe that you're leading, right? This stuff. That helps me buy other stuff that I also have trouble understanding, right? So these are all things that you can set a mood for with consumers, just based on what you surround yourself with and the type of, if you're bold enough. So, of course, whose feet those are? That's Usain Bolt, the same guy who you saw in the commercial earlier. And he ends up winning in Beijing and Berlin and setting all types of world records. And this funny story around this, he loves blue and he wanted his shoes to blue. I can't tell you how hard discussion we had with him because we didn't want the shoes to be the same color as the track because otherwise it wouldn't show up as well. So attention to detail, things like these matter, right? So by 2006, we were 330 euro on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. So in a matter of 6 years, we went from 6 euro to 330 euro. That was huge, right? So if you ask me what we did, it's just desirability and design, and the two of those things allowed us to differentiate ourselves from the competition, and the rest was history, right? So Barbados. So I'm from Barbados, and I had the opportunity to, I always wanted the opportunity to go home and contribute back after, I've left 25 plus years now, and And I got a call one day from the chairman of the Board of Tourism to talk about something totally different. He knew I was connected to somebody from Brazil. They were looking to Brazil. And at the end of the call, I said, who's your agency? He told me who it was. And he says, why? He says, because, I don't think they're doing, I didn't use those words, exactly, but they're not doing a good job, right? And so I didn't hear anything from him. We talked a little bit about it, not very much. I didn't hear about it for probably about 4 months. I actually forgot. And then I got a call saying, would you like to come home next week? And literally, that's how it all started with Barbados as a client. So long story short, they signed a contract with Rihanna, but they had no idea what to do with her. They did a concert the first year, and then what else do you do with her? Like she's done pretty much everything anyway. So, but one thing we needed to do was we knew rebranding was in order, and we wanted to sort of get Barbados current with the online brand, because obviously we have a physical brand on island, but the online brand didn't really reflect what the country was all about, and it's just gotten like British and staid, and it just didn't have the amount of excitement that really happens once you get there. So I talked to the chairman we went down to Barbados in May, and we launched a global campaign in November. Now, if you know anything about show business, you know that to get people's calendars together, never mind Rihanna's calendar together, is really, really tough. And we did a 2-day shoot in August, and we had to put together that whole campaign by the beginning of November. So we started with the campaign in November with something that wasn't obvious. If you notice here, we never show her face, right? We launched this a week after she was on Facebook as the person with the biggest following. She did an interview, and so immediately the press hit us. Well, she was just on Facebook. Why wouldn't you use her face? And then one smart person said, actually, I think it's kind of refreshing that they didn't use her face, right? And that's where it all started. And so it was amazing, it's just thinking a little bit differently about what to do with somebody that has, the type of brand that she has, and trying to be a little bit more subtle or a little bit different in how you use it. We did a brand video launch. I made Diamonds had just come out, and we said, okay, well, we should do a video, because it was a photo shoot that we did. So all we did was to put a camera over the shoulder of the photographer, and we captured B-roll footage. Out of that B-roll footage, we created a video. So again, we're talking about a country, right? We paid the photographer, but we didn't hire a separate, massive video team. We had one guy over the shoulder of the photographer, and we created a brand video that now has well over 1 million views. And I will play it for you.
Shine bright like a diamond. 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 Fine light in the beautiful sea. I chose to be happy. You and I, we're like diamonds in the sky. You're a shooting star, I see, a vision of ecstasy. When you hold me, I'm alive. We're like diamonds in the sky. Shine bright like a diamond. Shine bright like a diamond. Shining
Okay, so you can see that there were very, very unusual locations chosen. We have her running through a sugarcane field. We have her in a cave. We have her, playing dominoes with local fishermen. There's so many other options that people would have used, that were much more traditional. There are beautiful hotels that we could have shot her in and everything. But she's from Barbados. I'm from Barbados, right? And we want to tell a story that had something to it. So we just went back to the basics, really, of things that we recognize. The one thing she said to me is, Adrian, I don't want to do anything corny, right? And that was like literally the only thing that governed this video. Even at the end, you don't see any fancy end tag, like come to Barbados, visit barbados.com or whatever it is. It's just a simple end card with the back of a fishing boat. Right? So we didn't do just the obvious. We tried to differentiate here, and the creative elements and all these things really, really came together to make this into what we felt was one of the most successful commercials. Obviously, with her following, that's a little bit easier, right? Talk about strategic partnership. So, by the way, timing is everything. We launched that a week after Diamonds went #1 on Billboard. So, it's just, all these things have to be coordinated. So there are some practical sides to it as well. But I'm just saying, really taking care of the creative elements.
Accident, just like Hussein won in Beijing. Was that by an accident? Was that luck?
Well, there's a lot of luck in everything that you do, but your choices, really, really matter. Like, I had to make a big call about Diamonds as a song because she had the whole album. Diamonds wasn't #1, but there was something about the sound that I felt had, something to. So I had to make the choice. I had to negotiate with Sonny and all these guys before the song went #1. Actually, towards the end of our negotiations was when the song started to climb the charts, which was absolutely the worst time to be negotiating rights, for song. So yeah, part of it is luck. We did get lucky in both cases, both Usain Bolt and with this, but we had things in place that were effective, when the time came. So that was the preparation piece.
Who was the target market for the Barbados campaign?
Well, we were going for the 25 to 40-year-old young professional, type of crowd. Barbados has one of the highest repeat rates in the Caribbean, but the average age is 55 plus in terms of visitor. So we didn't want to alienate that audience, but we wanted an audience that there's a relatively short window with an audience that's sort of 50 plus. So we needed to broaden that audience, and because make the island seem a little bit more vibrant and stuff, because it is there. So the answer is 25 to 40 from a demographic standpoint.
Just to make this more concrete, did you have a clear objective for that Puma ad campaign and this Barbados? Like,
right.
Barbados, did you say, like, I want to increase travel by 20% or something like that?
Yeah.
I just wanted to make it a little more concrete, because I understand the creative part, but what you're aiming toward, I'm still kind of fuzzy.
Right. Well, in the case of Barbados, they have currently about 600,000 visitors to the island, long-stay visitors to the island right now. Obviously, we would love to grow that as quickly as possible. But we did not focus on return on investment, in the typical sense. We knew that it would be some built in. We had targets, but if we walked into some of these decisions thinking about what we would get out of it first, we would not have done them. And so our focus was really on the creative side. We had, underpinning all of this, you definitely have targets like that. We definitely wanted to grow the audience or the visitor arrivals to Barbados by 20% plus, right? Then we also realized, okay, arrivals aren't even really a good measure, right? Because a lot of people can come, but if they leave after one day, they count as arrivals, but they're not on the island for any length of time. So then we started looking at hotel nights, like how long are people actually spending on it? And that gave a totally different metric. So all this is underpinned by, numbers, but you first have to make sure that you have something that people want, something that people feel is desirable.
Question: when you target this market, the 25 to 40,
Mm-hmm.
is that has an impact on the people that normally goes there, the 55 plus, say, well, no, because now these junkies are coming, I don't like it anymore, and the spending per day is the same, or is more or less, or any measure overall, the full economics?
Well, generally Barbados is a fairly, it's not cheap, right? And it's a little bit out of the way, and we were a British colony before, so it generally tends to attract a higher end demographic, and that's why it skews that way. But one of the things that I remembered was that, there are certain areas of Barbados that were big party areas when I was growing up. And those places have literally died on the vine. And so what was happening then is beginning to change now, is that the older demographic tends to go out at night, they'll go to dinner and go out for one drink, and then by 11 o'clock or something, everybody's going home, right? So we're thinking about the business aspect of this is we just want to extend, and that person is not going to be alienated because they have the two don't necessarily intersect, right? We also want a younger demographic, and the reason for having a younger demographic is like, you have a much longer time for people to repeat many more times as well. So it's very, very risky to have, such a short, time. And I know it gets controversial, but it's just the reality of it. Somebody's going to visit every year versus, for 3 years, or somebody over the course is going to visit 10 times, right? It makes a difference. So these are some of the hard sort of discussions that you have to have when you're talking about this. But you're right, there were some concerns about alienating, the group that was already there. But the fact is that the business, especially in the evenings, stand to benefit, quite a bit. Liquor sales, for example. Barbados has one of the oldest rum, Mount Gay rum, and so they're hurting. So you just add it all up. It really, really makes a difference whether people stay out till 4 in the morning or if they go home at 11. So we don't want to replace, but just broaden the scope of what we're doing. So we did beautiful microsites. Most of the time, Caribbean websites have palm trees and all this other junk on it. You can see these are very, very simple, and we just focus. I banned the color blue from the palette, right? So if you notice, there's no blue except it's coming from the image itself. So this is one of the things when we worked with the Barbados Tourism, everything they had a blue background. I was like, well, you lose everything when you do that, right? And so there's simple things that don't really cost much can make a big difference in the impact of what you're doing. So then we released the images in January through July. She launched the first image, and it goes crazy on Instagram and Twitter and everywhere. So I have one in Facebook post that got 60,000 likes in 1 hour. It's just absolutely nuts. So it's amazing visibility. So these are some of the images. It's hot, right? And
She's
then
the most famous Barbados alumnus of all time.
yes, I would say so at this point. Yeah.
And like when I saw this campaign, I thought she's giving something back. She's made it, and she's come back home, and she's
Yep.
the spokesperson. Was it easy for her to do? It seemed fitting with her personality, or was it? a challenge to get her on board?
Well, we signed a contract with her, which was for her a nominal contract, but it was still, a few million dollars. But it was for over a 3-year period. Like, if you talk about what we paid for Serena Williams, or later on what we paid Usain Bolt, is nothing compared. So she's very, very grounded in the whole. In Barbados, it didn't really have, it wasn't that, I mean, we did 10 different setups, meaning changes of clothes, and 4 different locations in 2 days with her. Most celebrities, you're lucky if you get 1, maybe 2 per day. So in terms of even just the shoot that we did, the amount of effort, those were 15-hour days. She was late all the time, but as usual. But everybody is late when you're famous, I guess. That's like a part of it. But once she's on set and working, it was amazing work ethic, and I can't say enough positive about the experience that we had with her. We launched all these a bunch of contests then on Facebook and Twitter with her, and just to reinforce the message. We did partnerships with River Island, where she did a fashion collection. They came down and they did the shoot for her collection in Barbados. They liked it so much they shot their whole collection for this season in Barbados. We partnered with HTC One when they launched in London, and that took us onto mobile. And so we did a contest. The winner was a blogger, and she ends up taking a bunch of pictures of herself in Barbados, which got us a lot of traction. So then with each one of these partnerships, then we have Rihanna, we have HTC, we have Barbados, so you can see how the audience that you have is sort of magnified with smart strategic partnerships. Then we did a couple things just to showcase the island. We call these Barbados moments. So they're just like 10-second clips. Instead of just an image, we just show a very, very simple thing. And the idea behind this is if you're just driving through the island and you just glimpse, oh, that's beautiful, and then you continue, it's disposable, really. You can watch 10 of them if you want. It's not much of a commitment, but it's just something that if you're bored at your desk or something, you can take a break. That was sort of the idea behind these. So we did 2 things with River Island, and then she did the cover of Glamour magazine. We did a contest with that. You can see how all the creative is put together, and there's a lot of attention and time that goes into how you put together creative so it's not just about the idea, it's about the design of the idea as well. Another collaboration with MAC Cosmetics. So you can see how we started with one strategic partnership and then leveraged that across many more. And talk about measurement, you can see the spikes. Whenever we did something, those are the huge spikes that you see, and definitely a marked difference between pre-campaign and campaign. So the result was 1 billion media impressions earned since the launch of the campaign. It was really in 1 year. And nobody does this, but somebody says, well, how much is a billion impressions worth? And most agencies will tell you you can't. You just pay for impressions. Impressions isn't really worth much. You don't know where it's going, where it's coming from. We said, well, if I pay Travel and Leisure for a 6-page spread, they're going to tell me for 300,000 impressions is going to cost you, X, right? 1 point something. So I was like, well, there is a value then. So we just did the math and at 4 cents per impression, and this was a value. This is probably half of the budget for Barbados tourism for the year. So that's that in terms of measurement is a big plus. And now we're beginning to see arrivals. This Christmas was one of the biggest months for arrivals in the last 7 years, I believe. So in summary, the strategy, the thing is to do this, right? You need strategy, of course. You create your game plan, and you make sure that your mission statement matches up with, what you want to do. And desirability should always be a part of it somehow, Implementation with smart strategic partnerships. You can't do enough. Don't be afraid to partner with people. It can help you move very, very quickly. You use their audiences and your audiences as well. Staying ahead, a constant stream of creative initiatives. And then I just saw this. I was reading, Tim Cook says, in the long run, you're only relevant as a retailer and merchant if your customers love you. And it seems like a very, very simple sentence, but the whole element of desirability comes in there, and it's a long-term game, not a short-term game. 3 principles of branding, and I think you would have seen these now through all of the case studies that I've gone through. There's always differentiation, there's always some element and drive towards desirability, and there's always a high design factor. And hopefully, something that I've said tonight, I'm just trying to give a way of thinking, not anything special really. It's just a way of thinking about how to approach branding that can help you punch through the noise and help your brand to stand alone. Thank you very much. That's it. Questions?
Yeah. So for a very basic brand question that every startup faces is what to call ourselves.
Right.
What are your thoughts about like a name that people will remember? Like Uber, Puma, these are like pretty abstract versus a lot of companies, we have these like long descriptive names which seem sort of cumbersome.
Yeah.
How should we think about that?
Well, I think the same principle applies. There's no harm in going to a design school nearby and doing a competition, for a name, or getting some design interns around, and you pay them for 4 or 5 hours, and just leave them in a room by themselves and come back after hour or 2 and see what they have. You don't have to come up with it yourself. That's the first thing. And then, it doesn't always have to directly align with what you're doing. Google is a perfect example. Like, somebody I don't know how that happened, but I can imagine some agency present, okay, well, this is what, you know what I mean? Like, or Geico. Think of the guy who presented, well, this gets away from naming, but presented, I'm going to have a lizard with a British accent. You know what I mean? Like, these types of things is not always linear. So I'd say be as creative as you can be. The more creative you are with your name, the more distinctive it can be. Most people ask, well, why did you call it that? That's an opportunity for you as a CEO to start talking about your company. That's an open invitation. If it already makes sense, there's some other question, right? But you want to have as many stories about your company as possible, and it starts with the name of the company. And so be creative. Don't be afraid if people don't understand exactly what it means. The most important thing is that it means something to you. Thought I saw another hand.
With design, like Apple, this is the iPhone 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful design. And why ruin it with a cover, right? Like a plastic cover. And I had an iPhone 4S, and for 4 years I never broke it. I've had this for 6 months, and I dropped it, and it cracked. And so it's like there's a disconnect between this beautiful design and the need for protection of this expensive thing.
Yeah.
So everybody ruins their iPhone with a cover on it.
Right.
Why is that disconnect there?
I have the same problem that you have. I love the design, and I can't buy a cover for it. It's not practical. It's an emotional thing, And it's. I don't know what the answer is. You have a choice as a consumer, but I think from a design perspective, they want to make a beautiful phone first. And that is what drives the amount of attention that they get. That's what drives why consumers love them that much. And then the people who care about their phone so much that they want to put on a big thing over it, they do. I really care about my phone. I just try my best not to drop it. And if I drop it, I know I'm probably going to buy another one, right? So, that's where the line between practicality and design comes in. First, you really have to be concerned with the desirability of your product. That's the main thing. The practicality part of it, you can always fill that in. There's always the practical side that you can fill in. But the really, really hard thing is to make the product desirable. I don't know if I answered your question, but
So there are different markets, right?
huh?
There's a market, say people say, I like the way it looks. And they say, for example, I have an HTC that is Microsoft, and it have fallen like 20 times and doesn't break.
Right.
Doesn't break at all.
Yeah.
And that doesn't need protection.
Yeah.
And for me, it's more important than a bulky thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It depends. Yeah, it's really a personal choice, right? Whether you buy the phone at all.
So what if you're in an industry that functionality matters that much, that there is not so much left for design? Let's say like medical devices or something like that.
Everything can be desirable, right? There's no reason why a medical device has to be ugly, right? What kills me is looking at all these electric cars, like the Prius and all this stuff. I was like, I love the idea, but I could never buy the car, right? Like this is a thing, So I think like people feel like that you have something that isn't going to be seen in certain ways, and they feel like, okay, well, let's just focus on functionality of it. But I think there's always an element where you can say, no, it also has to look good. If you're a medical device, and I'm being operated on, I'm already scared. I see this ugly device coming at me, I'm even more scared, right? It's like simple things that matter. We did, just for a practical example, we had VMware as a client. And it was through another agency, and they're B2B, right? So, you look at, their cloud product and, all these different things, they are very, very technical, and they're CTO to CTO type discussions and stuff. So, but they wanted to move to small and medium business, how to grow their market. Now they're talking about people like me who are, very savvy, or as savvy as they would have been with their current products, and they need to figure out how to talk to that consumer base. And so they came to us, and we're talking to the agency that we're dealing with, and he says, I met the GM, he said, well, I'm having a problem, communicating exactly what you said. So I said, okay, well, I don't know if I can solve it, but I know some kids that they make up stories all the time, and maybe we can come up with a nice story that, can help, solve your problem. So I have an independent film team. We premiered at Sundance a couple of years ago. I said, you know what, I'm going to get the writer and director and a couple other people from my team, from my film team. They make short films all the time, all this crazy stuff. And I'm going to bring them over to VMware, we're going to have a meeting, and then I'm going to have them create some stories about it. And so, we ended up making 6 commercials for VMware. And these were very, very different. So instead of talking about the technical features of the product, where we ended up was around this concept of, this virtual computer. So at one point, an IT guy had to go from computer to computer to fix each one. Now there's software, you can control everything from one computer. So we came up with this idea of free time, right? Like, what is the IT guy doing now that he doesn't have to go to all these different computers? So then we started making up stories about what he did with his free time, right? And this opened the door, to all types of crazy stories. We presented about 20 of them over to VMware. They picked 6, and we ended up doing commercials for them that they would never have dreamed to have, but just around the concept of free time, right? So this is an example, to your point, of how you can take something that inherently isn't a very sexy business and do something interesting with it. Yes.
In terms of what you're showing, it's really retail and consumer oriented. In terms of say an individual, specifically me, who's had a small consulting business, left it for a while, and now thinking of redoing it, rebranding. Is there a way that a lot of this could apply in that type of an educational consulting business, or what would you say about that?
Yeah, I'd like to say that it's really a people business, right? Everything that I've presented is really about creating things that create some type of emotional connection to people. And you kind of have to find that, whatever that niche is, a way to get in that sort of, this element of surprise or discovery or something. So even if you're in the consulting business, there's always a way. I don't know what line of consulting you're in. What line of consulting you're in?
Educational.
Educational.
So I've done a lot of work with charter schools and special education. So it's, I mean, there's definitely, I work with autistic students. I work with, a lot of emotional kind of.
Right. Yeah, there's always a way. You might do. There's some very like simple things, like you could host a design competition for, a school to house, kids that, there's very, very simple things that you can do that can make a difference, just thinking a little bit out of the box. And it doesn't have to be direct. It can be a subset, like what would the perfect school look like for these set of kids, for example. And you open up a design competition with a few prizes or something. And now you have content that you can host on your website, on your, share, however you want to. These are all things that you can use. And, there's somehow you find an angle, but there's always goes back to finding something that's desirable and appealing and, has some sort of, I don't know how exactly to describe it, but the energy that, like he's talking about he feels about his iPhone. He can't bring himself to put a cover on it, like these types of things matter. And in any industry that you're in, you can find that there's always something. And generally it comes from, driven by, a creative person or persons that are thinking a little bit outside of the, just a straight line.
When assembling a team,
Yep.
what makes you, or what process helps you know that they're connected to your mission, or what do you prioritize in actually creating your team? You talked about the designing side,
Right.
their capability, but in terms of them, you feeling confident in their abilities to work not only with you, and what stands out, choices you've made?
Right. The question is, how do you pick somebody? How do you pick your team? The first criteria that I use is interest in the subject matter. Right. I don't have one of the principles for our company is that we don't have we have like a virtual team. We don't have an office with a ton of people in it who just get put on projects, whether they're interested in it or not. We profile, a client, we very carefully, and then I go out and I find people who are interested in that particular subject matter or interested in the challenge somehow. That's sort of the primary way that I choose the team. The other way, is that no matter what, like I mentioned before, however I pick the team, I also make sure that people are hungry, that they're, there's some type of an edge there. I can manage the ego. That's my job. right? So I don't really care if somebody comes with an ego or not if they're good, right? A lot of people shut down people, oh, too big of an ego, but are they talented, right? That's what I ask. And my job as a manager is to, sort of take care of that and deal with it. And if I can't deal with it, but I'm not going to shut down talent because I want to have people that I get along well with, or look just like me, or think similar to me, or won't, sort of have an argument with me about a particular line of thinking. So I shut down all of those things in the effort to really figure out, okay, what does this client need, and what does it take to make them desirable, and then what is the how do we shape the team, balance, of course, as much as we can, and of course, if I can get people who are good and egoless and perfect, but it doesn't happen like that. Generally, people who are creative, there's all types of things that happen. But in general, I would say that you just go with your gut and just, be willing to accept people who are, different, and but the most important thing is to profile your client, and then, just make sure that you're, most people know, you have good people. It just is obvious.
I think that's what makes you successful. You get the talent that you need for a particular job.
Yes, that's the key to what I mean. Typical agencies now, they're worried about utilization rates, right? So whoever's there that's not being utilized is on that project, right? I don't deal. I saw a lot of that at Puma, where one minute the project is very good. I'm happy with the work, and then maybe the A team has now moved on to the next new client, and I'm still getting a good team, but it's not quite what it was, So, yeah, being able to select your team is important, and we pulled them together. In the case of the Barbados engagement, that team was 100 people, and then when the project is over, we sort of disappear like Ocean's 11, and then we come back together again for VMware, which is 30 people, right? But they're all profiled according to the client and their interests in the subject matter. Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. I know it's cold out there and there's a big effort, so thank you. Much appreciated. And if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me. You can find me through Ad Hoc Industries. I have a few cards as well if you need to contact me. Thank you.